welcome to my home. I know many of you ask, can I come to your house? Well, this is my house. I'll show you Willow in a little bit because I know you love her. She's our favorite little Goldie. I am going to be reading you guys a read aloud. Believe it or not, I don't have a lot of children's books at my house. They're mostly at school. So hopefully you'll enjoy this book. I think it'll be really fun. It is fantasy. What does that mean? That's right. Fantasy is like fiction, but has things in it that are not actually possible. They will not come true. So in this book, there is a little mouse who lives with a family. So would that actually happen? No, but it's really fun to imagine. And that's why I thought you guys would probably like this book. So we'll just do it. I thought this would kind of be fun in an extended way where we can stay connected and you can look forward to the next day when I read you more of the book. I will also have some comprehension questions at the end as well as some writing assignments. So those of you who thought you could get out of school, no. Also, if you're not in my class this year, but I've had you in the past, or you're just watching this for fun, then thanks for hanging out with me. Of course, I miss all of you kiddos at Turner, and I hope you are enjoying your time at home. As you can see, I've grabbed a blanket, and I'm getting all snuggly, so you do that too, and when you're ready, we can get started. One last thing, I can tell when you do not watch the whole thing, so if you're trying to trick your parents by saying, yeah, I listened to the story. I know. Teachers always know. I actually can tell it. So the story we're starting today is Stuart Little, written by E.B. White. And you're in luck, it actually has some cute little pictures, so I'll be showing those to you too. Chapter 1, In the Drain. When Mrs. Frederick C. Little's second son was born, everybody noticed that he was not much bigger than a mouse. The truth of the matter was, the baby looked very much like a mouse in every way. He was only about 2 inches high, and he had a mouse's sharp nose, a mouse's tail, a mouse's whiskers, and the pleasant, shy manner of a mouse. Before he was many days old, he was not only looking like a mouse, but acting like one too, wearing a gray hat and carrying a small cane. Mr. and Mrs. Little named him Stuart, and Mr. Little made him a tiny bed out of 4 clothespins and a cigarette box. Unlike most babies, Stuart could walk as soon as he was born. When he was a week old, he could climb lamps by shinnying up the cord. Mrs. Little saw right away that the infant clothes she had provided were unsuitable, and she set to work and made him a fine little blue worsted suit with patch pockets in which he could keep his handkerchief, his money, and his keys. This is kind of a weird baby, right? Every morning before Stuart dressed, Mrs. Little went into his room and weighed him on a small scale, which was really meant for weighing letters. At birth, Stuart could have been sent by first-class mail for 3 cents, but his parents preferred to keep him rather than send him away, and when at the age of a month he gained only 1/3 of an ounce, his mother was so worried she'd sent for a doctor. The doctor was delighted with Stuart and said that it was very unusual for an American family to have a mouse. He took Stuart's temperature and found that it was 98.6, which is normal for a mouse. He also examined Stuart's chest and heart and looked into his ears solemnly with a flashlight. Not every doctor can look into a mouse's ear without laughing. Everything seemed to be all right, and Mrs. Little was pleased to get such a good report. "Feed him up," said the doctor cheerfully as he left. The home of the Little family was a pleasant place near a park in New York City. In the mornings, the sun streamed in through the east windows, and all the Littles were up early as a general rule. Stuart was a great help to his parents and to his older brother, George. Because of his small size and because he could do things that a mouse can do, and was agreeable about doing them. One day when Mrs. Little was washing out the bathtub after Mr. Little had taken a bath, she lost a ring off her finger and was horrified to discover that it had fallen down the drain. "What had I better do?" she cried, trying to keep the tears back. "If I were you," said George, I should bend a hairpin in the shape of a fish hook and tie it into a piece of string and try to fish the ring out with it. So Mrs. Little found a piece of string and a hairpin, and for about a half hour she fished for the ring. But it was so dark down the drain, and the hook always seemed to catch on something before she could get it down where the ring was. "What luck?" inquired Mr. Little, coming into the bathroom. "No luck at all," said Mrs. Little. "The ring is so far down I can't fish it up." "Why don't we send Stuart down after it?" suggested Mr. Little. "How about it, Stuart? Would you like to try?" "Yes, I would," Stuart replied, "but I think I'd better get into my old pants. I imagine it's wet down there." "It's all of that," said George, who was a little annoyed that his hook idea hadn't worked. So Stuart slipped into his old pants and prepared to go down the drain after the ring. He decided to carry the string along with him, leaving one end in charge of his father. "When I jerk 3 times on the string, pull me up," he said. And while Mr. Little knelt in the tub, Stuart slid easily down the drain and was lost to view. In a minute or so, there came 3 quick jerks on the string, and Mr. Little carefully hauled it up. There at the end was Stuart with the ring safely around his neck. "Oh, my brave little son," said Mrs. Little proudly, as she kissed Stuart and thanked him. "How was it down there?" said Mr. Little, who was always curious to know about places he had never been to. "It was all right," said Stuart, but the truth was the drain had made him very slimy. Ooh! And it was necessary for him to take a bath and sprinkle himself with a bit of his mother's violet water before he felt himself again. Everybody in the family thought he had been awfully good about the whole thing. Okay, some questions for you. Question number 1. How did Mrs. Little lose her ring? Question number 2. What was the first idea that they had to get the ring out of the drain, and why didn't it work? Hey Willow, you want to say hi? Say hi to the kiddos. This is what you call a sleepy girl. She really likes to be right by the back door and lay in the sun. Aww. All right, chapter 2, home problems. Stuart was also helpful when it came to ping pong. The Littles liked ping pong, but the balls had a way of rolling under chairs, sofas, and radiators. That's a heater. And this meant that the players were forever stooping down and reaching under things. Stuart soon learned to chase balls, and it was a great sight to see him come out from under a hot radiator, pushing a ping pong ball with all his might. The perspiration, sweat, rolling down his cheeks. The ball, of course, was almost as high as he was, and he had to throw his whole weight against it in order to keep it rolling. The Littles had a grand piano in their living room, which was all right, except that one of the keys was a sticky key, and it didn't work properly. Mrs. Little said she thought it must be the damp weather, but I don't see how it could be the damp weather, for the key had been sticking for about 4 years. Yeah, probably not the weather, right? During which time there had been many bright, clear days. But anyway, the key stuck, and it was a great inconvenience. That means it was a problem to anyone trying to play the piano. It bothered George particularly when he was playing the scarf dance, which was a rather lively song. It was George who had the idea of stationing Stuart inside the piano to push the key up for the second it was played. This was no easy job for Stuart, as he had to crouch down between the felt hammers so that he wouldn't get hit on the head. But Stuart liked it just the same. It was exciting inside the piano, dodging about, and the noise was quite terrific. Sometimes after a long session, he would emerge quite deaf, as though he had just stepped out of an airplane after a long journey. And it would be some little time before he really felt normal again. Mr. and Mrs. Little often discussed Stuart quietly between themselves when he wasn't around, for they had never quite recovered from the shock and surprise of having a mouse in the family. He was so very tiny, and he presented so many problems to his parents. Mr. Little said that, for one thing, there must be no references to mice in their conversation. He made Mrs. Little tear from the nursery songbook the page about the 3 blind mice, see how they run. Probably a good idea. I don't want Stuart to get a lot of notions in his head, or ideas, said Mr. Little. I would feel badly if my son grew up fearing that a farmer's wife was going to cut off his tail with a carving knife. It was such things that make children dream bad dreams when they go to bed at night. That'd give me a nightmare for sure if I were him. Yes, replied Mrs. Little, and I think we had better start thinking about the poem, "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." I think it might embarrass Stuart to hear mice mentioned in such a belittling manner. That's right, said her husband, but what shall we say when we come to that line in the poem? We'll have to say something. We can't just say, "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring." That doesn't sound complete. It needs a word that rhymes with house. What about louse? Said Mrs. Little. Or grouse, said Mr. Little. I suggest souse, remarked George, who had been listening to the conversation from across the room. It was decided that louse was the best substitute for mouse, and so when Christmas came around, Mrs. Little carefully rubbed out the word mouse from the poem and wrote in the word louse, and Stuart always thought the poem went this way. "'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a louse." The thing that worried Mr. Little most was the mouse hole in the pantry. You know, like that little hole in the back of our makerspace that Harry our hamster escaped through last year? Kind of like that. This hole had been made by some mice in the days before the Littles came to live in the house, and nothing had been done about stopping it. Mr. Little was not at all sure that he understood Stuart's real feeling about a mouse hole. He didn't know where the hole led to, and it made him uneasy to think that Stuart might someday feel the desire to venture into it. "After all, he does look a good deal like a mouse," said Mr. Little to his wife, "and I've never seen a mouse yet that didn't like to go into a hole." Okay, question time. What was a problem that the Littles had that Stuart helped them solve? And you can't tell the one about the ring, because we already talked about that. I want you to write it down using this sentence frame in a complete sentence, with a capital and a period. And then I want you to draw me your own picture showing how this problem was solved. Well, my friends, that is it for today because, well, you heard it yourself. I need to take Willow on a walk. And it's a beautiful day, so we might as well get out just a little bit. I miss you guys so much, and I hope that this helps you feel a little bit closer so that you're not missing out on so much school. Also, have your parents take a picture of your work and email it to me so that I can see what you're doing. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!